Hey everybody, this is Petey from the Spinner Rack, and you thought it was over, didn't you? You thought it was over, that I wouldn't have another angle that I needed to cover, right? You thought that was over, didn't you? I said it was over, but this time I had another angle that I had to talk about, right? So what happens after you do Man of Steel and it goes to 1,000,000? What happens when you have a reprint that's got 7 to 8 printings of the original trade, multiple versions of the trade, a side version here with the original comic books? What happens when you go 50 and you get Time magazine cover? What happens when you get a cartoon? you, you get the energy, money to back another Superman movie, as I said. Then you have a TV show, right? Fueling the Lois and Clark. All this stuff happens. At some point, someone's going to ask for a sequel, right? But at the same time, I guess I think Byrne was either ending his run on Wonder Woman and about to do Spider-Man and the X-Men: The Hidden Years. Not to say that there was any inkling that Byrne would do a sequel to Man of Steel, but at the same time, what happened? Um, let's see. Not to say that they would do a sequel with Byrne, even though he had done a couple of Superman projects. He did a couple annuals, a couple of inserts within a couple of the issues. He'd been a part of the wedding, right? But they had another hot. Well, we had a team of someone that we lost, which is Tim Sale, right? And this is a book which I should go through on its own. And I'm just going to go to a quick part to show you. I mean, he was a great artist, sad loss to the comic book industry. And here we go. He made this connection. Well, actually, he made the connection early with Jeph Loeb on the, what's it called? On the Challenge of the Unknown. I don't know if that's in this book, right? Sorry, guys. But they did like a dark Alan Moore type of thing with the Challenges of the Unknown. Yeah, here we go. They did like a darker Challenge of Unknown where all of them go through a remake. And, it didn't, light, go too crazy for them. But, and it actually didn't even keep them as the version of the challenge. This is them. This is how they looked, how they were older, and now some of the mock covers that he would get other artists to do, and he went on to do other things past that part, right? And so the hot, but the major thing, once Loeb had gotten some, I guess DC liked it, so they got them to do he'd done, Tim Sale had done a Legends, and they wanted Tim Sale to do another one, so they decided that they were going to do something in the same time as what's that thing? As Batman Year One, right? So they got a lot of notoriety from the Long Halloween and the two Halloween special and the miniseries, and we kind of hinted what we're going to do next, right? So the two of them got some notoriety from doing Batman, kind of a sequel to Batman Year One, right? And at the same time, they're also playing in the Image area. They're playing. Jeph Loeb is also working in the X-Men titles, right? So while he's with the X-Men titles, he's getting his style together. He's moving away from the Alan Moore stuff. And he's kind of going to this thing where he becomes like the ultimate writer for the image age or the modern age, whatever you want to call this age post the Bronze Age, right? He had developed a style where he was very sparse with dialogue. He was very much like an action movie. There would be lines, almost sometimes cliches, bits that are real catchy, that move quickly, and not a lot of dialogue. Taking what Frank Miller did and making it even sparser. So it almost made him like the ultimate image sort of writer, because he kind of had the chops to do like stuff like any of the classic writers, but he had this, since he was a Hollywood writer, he had this thing where he had this kind of bouncy style to it, and it's very sparse at times. So you're going to see that in his work. And he also liked to use a lot of cliches. So it was kind of like a commercial writer type of deal that Jeph Loeb was doing. And he's taking that on to the next project with Tim Sale. But they decided, after the success of 2 Batman things they did together, and he was having success over at the X titles, doing X-Men and Cable, they decided on Superman for All Seasons, right? And you can see, since I bought this from the Comic Buyer's Guide, haven't been able to keep too many of these from when I was young, or I guess I wasn't that young when this came out, but I was kind of jazzed up, right? I bought some of the Long Halloween, and I had already been back issues, bought the challenges that they did. So I was kind of jazzed up to see this, right? And I was impressed with it. I had no issue with it. Now, here we get to see the same work in print. And it looks as gorgeous as it does in the main volume, right? So they were thinking that there's some gaps in the Man of Steel where they could add story. They don't really kind of do as much to celebrate the Man of Steel. They just say that there's gaps that they could fill. They kind of talk about Alan Moore stuff and what Alan Moore meant to Clark and stuff like that. But ultimately, there's gaps they found some gaps in the Man of Steel where they would add story. And this is kind of the last one where they would follow along with what was going on in Man of Steel, right? So even though they do kind of retcon maybe a couple of things, we'll see. Well, maybe we'll see, right? And but when I saw this, I was like, yeah, I definitely wanted this. And it was a 4-part, what is it called? Prestige format. So it was like its own Dark Knight thing. But the hook of it is, one of the things that it would be able to do is everything that Byrne was not able to do, right? Because there was some restrictions in the public that they wouldn't really allow Byrne to do, right? Because one of the key things that people kind of had issue with was that his parents were alive, and the TV people, I don't know if it was TV or the fans, I think it was TV, they were kind of saying that, hey, his parents are around, he's going to be running home to mommy, asking for help, and this, that, and the other. That's not in Man of Steel, but it has been used in, I guess, it's been utilized a couple times in cartoons that we've seen. We see Superman go back home, and it's a good thing. But here's this volume, right? For Superman for All Seasons, right? So this is a vinyl. Like, you get the Tom Ford book, that's like vinyl. This is vinyl, right? I know, as well as this sold, it didn't sell as much as Man of Steel, but it has like Barney Henson is the colorist. They're very much as important as Tim Sale in this book. It's a gorgeous volume, right? So we're going to go through what I'm calling Man of Steel 2, right? And here is the cover. And we get these nice photos of Clark as a kid. So that's what in the article he talks about, keying into Clark on the farm and having this, he called a small, country mouse, city mouse. Clark starting his days on the farm in Kansas, and then so this kind of story was kind of being more like, let's say, it took between the gaps of the Man of Steel, but it would kind of be like Superman the movie, the portion of the movie. Yeah, it's basically Man of Steel if it was more like Superman the movie with an added touch. The Superboy element would be in the Clark Kent's angle. The Kents would be here to be Byrne described Clark Kent as Superman's Fortress of Solitude, where he could get away. They would turn Smallville into Superman's Fortress of Solitude, right? So that would be their subtle shift. And you'll see it within the art that this is kind of showing you, this the whole point of this is more, I should have titled it, but I was trying to pull people in, is calling this, this is basically about Superman's Fortress of Solitude, Smallville, right? So that's kind of the hook of the story. You can see it with these pictures, right? Of him being there, him and Lana at a swimming hole, all this bits of Americana, and kind of what, I guess even on our show, the struggle with Clark Kent identity as a human being and Superman, the alien portion of him that's in that's revealed when he finds out that he's not from Earth, right? And he says, Tim Sale says here, they're all talking about Tim Sale and his passing, right? He said, Tim Sale left us on June 16, 2020. We were two kids who started on DC's Challengers of the Unknown, and over the next 30 years, he took my words for Batman, Superman, and others and made them magical. He told stories in a way that would seem breezy, then others that made them, oh man, it's too far away. He told stories in a way that seemed, he told stories in a way that all seemed, He told stories in a way that it all seemed breezy, but anything but that. Okay. He told stories in a way that it all seemed breezy, but wasn't anything but that. I'm going to stop this chopping, right? So we got all these top guys talking about Tim Sale, right? And then we have his intro, Jeph Loeb's intro from 2022. So this isn't the original volume. This is a newer volume, right? It starts, and I guess this is after Kingdom Come, but it kind of let, the artists kind of do whatever they want with Superman. You know, be a harsh difference from way back when, where we would have Kirby Superman, who was constantly redrawn to look like Superman. You know, because they were struggling with Kirby's look for Superman, right? So in here, Tim Sale would go away from that and go to Superman as more of a farm boy, right? In the Superman costume, right? So we have a start, and it says, folks tend to call him the Man of Steel nowadays. Folks tend to call him the Man of Steel nowadays, right? So this is also your connection to the Man of Steel, right? And then he constantly here kind of uses the classic lines from Superman to kind of bring up different bits, right? So this is our start, and this is kind of like a film effect, which doesn't always work in comic books, but and see how sparse the dialogue is when we get here, and somehow it still works. I don't know if it's prestige format that you don't quickly turn the page, but it's somehow taking kind of what you'd see Frank Miller do in Sin City, but it's not a stark black and white. It would just be kind of taking that and having this where you have so much story here that you would miss. That you've got a pie cooling here, you got you know, probably some shoes for the house or something like that. There's a couple dogs here, maybe 3, right? You get the barn over here. All this stuff they've allowed him, given the time and the money, to let them just draw whatever he wants, right? And he's, made the Kents a little more crotchety at this period than Byrne did, but, and we see Pa Kent trying to do it on his own, trying to work through these things because his tractor is stuck, and Clark is there and asks to help, and he's able to help him out, right? And we see now Man of Steel is the first to kind of say that Clark and Lana kind of got along at some point in Smallville. I don't think they ever got to that point in the Superboy stories. When Marv Wolfman was doing it, he kind of pushed them two together. But the Man of Steel is kind of first where they kind of made them into that they were very romantic and almost near marriage at the end of high school, right? So we get the sense of family here, someone watching over Lana and how she's behaving, the parents being happy to have this ham, feeding the dog, and all these pictures. There's so much here, right? And Right? So at this point in the story, in the Man of Steel portion of it, Jonathan Kent has told Clark that he's not from Earth. So he's kind of being a tiny bit distant with Lana. I'm not sure why. Lana looks a little emaciated here, but who knows? So right, so they're kind of talking about the rocket and saying he's taking it in stride, and he's hearing what they're saying. Right, you can't really be doing anything in private, which is kind of. So they got him in a stage where he's kind of like not sure what to do, right? And in Man of Steel, once he tells him, he knows what he's supposed to do, right? So this story is more about how Clark Kent decided to help people out, right? So he's kind of trying to figure it out. We got so much Americana here. The telescope that would be in the kid's house. The model planes. You got the girl calendar. There's so much here, The globe. You'd have a globe in your house. And we go through Smallville. Now, it's hard to say because you could see even in the Silver Age and that they kind of struggle with Smallville stuff, but this is giving you a great backdrop, right, for Smallville. Like, it looks really nice, right? And we hear Pete Ross talking about trying to go to Metropolis, right? And we get to see some of the regulars in the town store playing cards, even the doctors in this store, right? And this is supposed to be a moment where everything is changing for Clark, right? We already know that he has super strength. And they're saying the thing of when some of these people who were there were kids at once, and Superman or Clark goes to get a haircut, and he's able to hear what Pete Ross is saying and stuff like that. And Clark can't cut his hair anymore, so it's trying to show you at this point he's at his, his full strength type of deal. When Man still kind of follows the thing that happened in I think it's Superman 53, where they have the origin of Superman, and Superman had the powers as a kid as he did have it in Man of Steel, but they're trying to have this moment. And you see, this is a Superman the movie moment, right? And he's at this stage where he's kind of worried, right? He's not sure what to do. And then, of course, a nice, handy hurricane comes out of nowhere, right? So it's really gorgeous stuff. And it's trying to show this is possibly the first time he flew, type of deal. But goes in, he sees a person who I guess owns a gas station and saves him. And he protects him from the fire also. And luckily, the parents survived it. And they're fixing up the the farm, and Clark realized he could do more. He wants to talk to a minister about it. He said, what if somebody could do more? Right? And then he graduates. So it kind of gives you an idea that Pete Ross gave him the idea to go to Metropolis. And he says his goodbye here to Lana, right? To explain to her basically why things aren't happening with him. He has to move on, right? And flies her around now. And this is more Clark having a moment where he can't really talk to her. And, this is a more of a moment that people have kind of think Frank Miller is trying to go play to this too. But it kind of comes from here, right? So they have a moment where, still kind of a bit of a romance here, right? But he says he's going to come back, right? And then we get the key moment. Now we saw it in newsprint. Newsprint, it looked pretty good. I can't, newsprint would be interesting to see if they printed this in newsprint, because newsprint isn't that bad. Look at that. It's pretty cool, right? So it's kind of giving that Americana of the Superman the movie, and giving you, going too quick, giving you the Americana in the Smallville section, right? But giving you kind of the Clark that was in Man of Steel, not the Clark that was in Superman the movie, right? Because he wasn't allowed to do anything with his powers. And his parents said he was here for something more important, right? So we have Metropolis, which is a little more of like the more fancy Metropolis. There's some futuristic type of, what's the name? I guess every comic book has some World's Fair in it, and that's what it's kind of doing here. We get introduced to the lineup at the Daily Planet. We got Perry, we got Lois, we got Jimmy, and I think Jimmy was originally this is Bill Tate, right? But and this is tying into that Marv Wolfman kind of wanted Lois and Lois to be after Lex Luthor being after Lois. We're playing it more to where Byrne had it, where Byrne had it. She didn't really have interests, and Superman saves a kid and ties into here that his mother made it for him, right? And we have Lex Luthor who's not happy with him, right? We got this another nice shot. So here, this really is not really newsprint, but the same cover, right? And this one is great right here because it kind of feels like summer, right? Feels like summer. Kind of it's got a classic. It's somewhere in between a futuristic Metropolis and the World's Fair, right? And Superman, and see how kind of sparse the dialogue is, allowing the pictures. And I think with good effect, it kind of allowed you to stay on the pictures. I don't think it worked as well when you look at Jeph Loeb's work on Captain America, but some cool Superman shots. But then there's this missile that comes and tries to destroy Metropolis, right? Superman takes it out into space. It explodes. And you see Superman marveling at his new home, right? And he goes back down, and Lex Luthor has to come and get out of this board meeting, right? Because Superman has found out something. He goes down, finds a submarine who shot the missile, and he's taking it somewhere, but at the same time, someone's on this submarine, right? So Lex Luthor shows up at this army base, guessing where the submarine is going to be brought, and Superman brings it. Right, so see how sparse this is, but you kind of stick with the pages. Some reason I'm not sure. It does. The comic book, I noticed in the Long Halloween it kind of read quickly, and this one does too, but you kind of stay on the pages a little longer. So once Superman gets it there, they got Lois by gunpoint, right? Superman takes the gun away, and Lois can handle things by herself, right? And kind of having that humor that was in the movie. It's also in Man of Steel, right? And we see Superman giving Lex no respect, right? Because I guess this is after they met in issue 4 of Man of Steel. No, this is I think. I'm not sure where this takes place, because they've kind of taken and stretched it out. But Luthor and Superman first meet, it's in issue 4, right? But this has Superman meeting Lex Luthor, kind of brushing him off. So they've added some more time to it. So they've been allowed to do whatever they want, right? And I think this is the same apartment that Clark always has. I think that's the same place that's established in the Superman thing. And at the same time, even with the hustle and bustle of the Metropolis, he finds up home, right? So this is kind of what a lot of the press and the fans didn't want to happen. But when you're the hottest creators at the time, you can do what you want. You can do these poignant moments where a guy goes home to his mother and father, and here's where they coin it, that this is his fortress of solitude. Going back to Smallville, right? And he's kind of struggling being in the city. Now, Byrne had kind of did a World of Metropolis, and they kind of showed you in, I think, one of the issues how Superman connects with Metropolis early on. He also goes to college out there. So how he goes from being a kind of country kid to kind of being up to speed, right? We're kind of going to try to see Lana, but Lana's gone. So he might have decided to rekindle, but they're trying to say that Superman came back to see her and she was gone, right? And nobody knows, but we know from this thing she kind of left, and at the same time she was trying to figure out what Superman was doing all that time, right? And he gets some, as Kwame Brown says, some home cooking. And we see this chemical lab. And Luthor has these drones, which is established in Man of Steel, right? And Superman knocks them away, sees someone that needs to be saved. And she becomes obsessed with Superman. And you realize and see how there's no real need to say this is a job for Superman, getting those guys out the way type of deal. So it has some kind of cliches, but that's kind of Loeb's style to kind of bring you in and connect you with the past, right? And these bits. So it'll be kind of like a Hollywood thing of having this cool line, right? And Luthor decides he's going to use her, right? Realize that she's the her love of Superman to her her advantage, right? So this would be, man, I wonder if he has the same number. Can I prove that this is from the same book? We shall see. Or did they retcon it? You got your time to guess. Yep. So at this point, Superman has put him into jail in the Man of Steel, right? So we got the closest thing to Frank Miller on this cover here. And this takes place after issue 5. But issue 5 was supposedly the first time Superman and Clark meets Lois, and they've added a little more time to it. So and now Lex, Metropolis is the home of Superman, right? And different from how Byrne had it, where, well, I guess at some point later, right, where he runs into Lex. And Lex has had it with Superman. He realizes that he's number 2 now to Superman, right? So he is going through this thing, and he comes up with a plan, right? So they're showing him do all this legwork. It's a cool setup, a cool sequence, time passing. I'm not sure why Superman is kind of watching over Lex, but it's having a moment between the two of them. And then issue 5, I think he's in there. Dr. 10. I think Dr. 10 is in there, right? So he's... But Dr. 10 is actually in... Yep. So here, Dr. 10 is in there, in this storyline, right? So it's setting up, even though once this became even bigger success, no one brings up that it's connected to Man of Steel. It's like it's something that's totally forgotten, right? So this takes place after between issue 4 and issue 5 of Man of Steel. And she's just sitting around watching a ton of Superman stuff. I think since she was a fan, she probably wanted to do it all by, she wouldn't need any of that stuff. And here, he asks a question about LL, and he's like, so it's playing off of the Mort Wessinger thing where she first sees LL, and it's actually Lana Lang. And they are more rivals than they are him being interested in her, right? But they kind of hint you. So here, something happens, truth, justice, and in the first Superman movie, Lex Luthor says he has a nerve gas, it's going to kill everybody. And Jeph Loeb decides, what if that was true? So kind of the stories are just that's why I kind of compared it to Image. Kind of allowed Jeff, Image always had fights. This allows the art to really breathe and just a small semblance of a story to kind of tie these things together. It's very simple, but at the same time, it leads to these double splash pages. And Superman supposedly have a moment between her and Truth, Justice, the American Way. I don't think that was very necessary, but, it kind of, without having the lines there, it kind of ties it into the other stuff, right? So You get a scene that's similar to what happens in, what's the name? And he realizes it's the whole town. And realizes the train is gonna just barrel into everything, right? And Superman, but it's also Luthor's dialogue just kind of making it more desperate, right? So lucky there's Star Labs who kind of points that she's lucky, but she gives him an idea to go to Lex Luthor, right? He goes to Lex Luthor. Luthor's okay. He's prepared for this. And Superman's not drawing in the right connections that he should, right? And he's already figured out from issue 5 that, well, guess time has passed, that Superman is alien, right? And hints that it could be Superman at fault. So Superman wants to fight, but he can't. If they have an antidote, maybe we'll do it. Now, this is the comic booky thing, which I don't sure this kind of works, but, you know, you just kind of move past it. And she has a name. She's a fan of Superman, and somehow she gets up a name, Toxin. Shouldn't be. She'd be Elixir, right? But she goes out there. She goes out as Toxin and cures everything. But at the same time, she passes out from exposure to it, right? And Superman feels he couldn't, you know, she saved the city and he couldn't. And he has this moment of despair. And somehow he kind of just talks Superman out of town, right? Which, that didn't really work for me, but it's just the art is just so killer, right? And I think I need to stay here in Smallville for a while, right? So kind of the thing that the news media and the fans didn't want, the people actually like when the bully makes the victim run home, and Superman is clearly running home, right? If you look at Man of Steel, and the times where Superman goes home, he's just going there for a visit. And they kind of make it, he kind of goes there when he's kind of struggling, right? His fortress of solitude, to get away from the hustle and bustle. And now with Superman gone, Luthor's troops kind of police the town. It's a police state, or a Luthor state, right? It says it as it should be. And of course, Clark Kent is gone. So it's like Superman's gone and Clark Kent. And then she tries to draw the correlation, but it's kind of, they shouldn't call any attention to it, right? So this, of course, happens after, what's it? Issue 6, where they've already talked things out and they're hanging out for the rest of the time here. So it's after Clark has his moment with his father, and no signs of Krypton is in this story. Like, not a bit of it, right? So they're having their moment. Goes back in town, running to Pete Ross. And of course, with them leaving town, Pete Ross was kind of bothered with it for some reason, right? And it's like, he was supposed to go and both of you guys left town, right? And Superman has a point, or Clark Kent has a point where you can't go home, right? And the storm is getting pretty bad. And the police chief is coming in, saying people gathering at the church. And right here, have Lana, who's kind of points out, so we'll be fine. Till then, we'll be fine. Right, Clark? And he says, yes, sir. He said, nothing like having a son who can change the course of mighty rivers, right? So here's another cliche, and say, what? She knows, I know. And that's a bit from Man of Steel issue 1, right? He starts realizing he can't do everything. He's kind of saying he's still that guy. And Smallville, who was once a town that was home of Superboy, has their first meeting with Superman, right? And he kind of fixes the town, saves things, but for some reason, while they're driving to the church, they're gonna almost get killed on this bridge. And Superman gets there to save him. And Pa's in trouble. And we think we're gonna lose Pa, but he saves him. And then he also finds the dog. So unlike, well, those stories, nothing really happened, but we had this another poignant moment where after the storm is there, they have a church vigil, and we see Superman leave, and Lana saying goodbye to Clark, right? And you realize Superman went back home to almost get Clark Kent went back home to get a story, right? I'm playing off the fact that Clark would get Superman stories, right? And we see this cat, and just the nuttiest thing. All right. I think this story was from, and the script is done from some personal perspective, which I can't really convey to you because that's kind of his style. He kind of overuses that, but you know, I think it kind of worked from this thing, right? We have Clark meeting Bruce Wayne, and Clark wishing he could go play, and I was not a fan of Alfred being Batman's Bruce Wayne's surrogate father, right? So I think it was, what's that thing called? Solo. They did a sequel to this where they have Clark going to prom, right? Getting dressed up and driving out there, tries to help someone who's stuck and gets his suit all messed up. He's able to clean it, dry it off, and he meets up with Lana in this general store. All right. And then I think there's more stuff, right? And we get the stuff of the past, right? And getting the old name of baby Kal-El, right? And the flying baby in the orphanage. So now at this point, they're not sticking to the Man of Steel stuff. Now they're going to, and in Man of Steel, Superman as a small kid, he just doesn't, you don't see him using the powers, right? So they get to the baby flying around in the, well, this is supposed to be baby flying around in the house. He wants to be careful. They go into Metropolis, and He's already leaping tall buildings, right? Right? And it says, so this is where you can see they've changed the history, right? And it says, Clark's always been strong. Now he also has speed. Imagine if you ever played football. Woo. Right? Then him going to the doctor and they can't so this is actually using the Clark's pass away. This is actually the Superman. Whew, I was scared. I was like, I hadn't seen this portion of it. Right? So this is the classic Superman origin with all the bits intact, right? All the nutty stuff that they had to showcase him as a baby, his first day of work at the Daily Star, and his parents still left in the suit at the end. So him minus. And this one's just a story of just a moment with Jeph Loeb's son Sam, and it's a kid who's struggling. Who's a friend to Clark Kent, and they meet up. And hinting that Lex Luthor is in town, right? And Superman being sad that they lost their friend Sam, right? So I think I had the postcard somewhere here. So that was a big. I enjoyed this story when it came out, and over time, as people talked about it over and over again, I kind of still liked it, but then it was kind of like, move over, Man of Steel. This is how it should have been done, type of deal, which I wasn't necessarily a fan of seeing. This is an amazing shot here too, right? And they talk about Tim Sale tells about Superman here, right? And then we get the script, right? And it says, before we begin, I'm thinking of how to make Superman All Series a little different in the writing as it is in the artwork. I began to find much we needed to be conveyed in a story that can be achieved in the first person narrative, right? So giving him a lot of room to play, right? So this, I think it's just a script for issue 1. Then they have some ink pages. You can see how much the inking added, the color added, but it's still, strong nonetheless, right? So I'm not sure it was in the original Absolute Edition. Two of the covers. The kind of, and talking about the blue line technique for the colors, right? Some of the painted stuff that was done for it. and then some of the pencil setup drawings for it, right? So yeah, this was when this first came out. I was a big fan of it. I enjoyed the art. I bought into all of this. I don't know if I was thinking that they were what I call image done right, having something where it's very visually strong, but at the same time, oh, this is the Earth 2 origin. I wasn't sure about that. I was like, oh man, they just allowed them to write over everything, right? And the Sam story. That's the picture for the original hardcover. And some sketches from, that's for the hardcover, some sketches that Tim Sale did. That's a great picture too. Yeah, so I mean, it's a gorgeous volume, and thankfully I was wrong. They didn't totally obliterate everything, but as time goes by, they're totally doing their best to try to forget Man of Steel and think of, hey, this that doesn't really have anything of Krypton and that sort of thing. Just saying, what if we got an origin just was kind of old pictures, old cool pictures, and it would go to what I think the critique that they got in Amazing Heroes, and the critique that Marv Wolfman gave it. They gave Man of Steel, said they were struggling with the story of issue 1. And what's the name says, there's no template for the new Superman. So if this was this, there'd be a very strong template for Clark, that, hey, when he has struggles, he goes to his Fortress of Solitude, regenerates, and that's kind of how Wolfman already wrote it too, where he got some struggles, went home, and nobody cries about it. But Byrne was very particular not to show Clark kind of having therapy sessions with his parents, that he was still going home to mommy and daddy, helping them, trying to help to get them to fix things. So that's about it. It's a gorgeous volume. I don't know what else to say about the art, but Tim Sale's a great artist. I also have, obviously, I already showed you this book on him. I don't think it's as good. It's very sparse in the story, but the art is good, even though it's not my type of Spider-Man. And Jeph Loeb, I'd really be interested in kind of talking with him as far as talking about his style of comics, because he feels like his style of comics are the comics that people would want to read from American comic writers that don't have a lot of dialogue, has some key lines that connect you to the story, and allow the art to kind of move. Now, again, I say that didn't work for Jeph Loeb and Rob Liefeld's Captain America, but it very much works for most of his kind of thing. And he's been one of the few that's been able to connect with a lot of different artists. So I guess that's about it. Spinner Rack out.